There's a word we heard both in the refrain we sang with the psalm and from the Jeremiah readings, the word balm. If I were to ask you, what's a balm? Would you be able to answer? See a few nods. Okay. I think the place we use it the most often these days is with lip balm, right? Like chapstick or lip gloss, lip balm. Or another word that's related to it that you might think of is the word balmy, like with the weather forecast. It's supposed to be a balmy 82 degrees on Saturday. And usually it means that the weather, it'll be nice and warm and sunny. If you look it up, balmy means mild and refreshing, soft and soothing. And so a balm is something like a cream or an ointment that refreshes and soothes. It's anything that heals and soothes and alleviates pain. It could be something like medicine or a heating pad even, or a phone call from a good friend. A balm is something that helps heal, that helps take away the pain. And that word comes from our Jeremiah reading this morning. The prophet Jeremiah lived in the 7th century BC. And if you remember some of your biblical history, the King Saul and David and Solomon, after Solomon died, the country of Israel split into two. There was Israel and Judah. And the northern kingdom was Israel, and they were conquered around the year 721 BC by Assyria. The southern kingdom, Judah, was smaller and weaker, and that's where Jeremiah prophesied, was in Judah, after Israel fell, before Judah did. Yet the writing was on the wall that it wouldn't be long before Judah was conquered by Babylon, which happened around the year 586 BC. And so that's why Jeremiah is here crying out for his people. Is there no balm in Gilead? Are there no doctors here? Why then have my people not been healed? Now, the other thing to know about this verse is that name Gilead. It was the name of a region east of the Jordan, the same Jordan River where Jesus was baptized. And so on the east side of it, this is region Gilead that was famous for plants that were used for medicinal purposes. So we have medicine, we have balm, and we have a people who are hurting. And that's why Jeremiah asks, why then have my people not been restored to health? What do you do when you've tried all the medicine and there's no healing? What do you do when the wound stays open? It's pretty easy to give up hope. I called my best friend from college, who's a surgeon, to ask about a medical perspective. And she said, well, of course you keep the treatment going, because the first goal is to get rid of all the infection. And once you do that and the wound is clean, but still not healing on its own, then you go after the source of the wound. You figure out what's causing it and address the root of the problem. And if after doing that the wound still won't close on its own, then you operate and you make it close with a skin graft or stitches or whatever is appropriate. However, my friend did acknowledge that sometimes it doesn't help to find the source of the wound. And she gave the example of a pressure ulcer. She says, like a patient who's a paraplegic, who's paralyzed from the waist down, and he has bed sores. Those bed sores are pressure ulcers, because the person's putting pressure on that wound, creating the ulcer. And so you know what's creating the sore, but you still can't prevent it, because the person's paralyzed from the waist down. All you can keep doing is turning the person so that they lie on different sides, and not always on the same side, aggravating the sore. The best you can do is keep the person comfortable, because you can't completely get rid of the pressure ulcer. You can't completely keep them from putting pressure on that sore, and so the wound stays open. That's the science behind it. However, we are also a people of faith. And so through whatever happens and whatever pain, we stay faithful. Now, what it means to keep the faith and not lose your religion is going to look different for different people. Jeremiah's faithful response to his people not being healed was to lament. And we hear it in that passage we read today. No healing, only grief. My heart is broken. Listen to the weeping of my people all across the land. Isn't the Lord in Zion? I could probably preach a whole sermon on lamenting, and I may one day. But I'll stick with this for now. Lament is a repeated cry of pain, of rage, sorrow, grief that comes out of suffering and a feeling of alienation. It's a prayer to God that lets us express our anger and our frustration, that life is not how it should be. And yet this kind of prayer also helps us hold on to remembering the compassion of God in the midst of our suffering. It's hope that the way things are just now is not the way they will always be. Because the one who prays a lament truly believes that God has the power to redeem and restore. That's the whole point of a lament. It's a faithful response to pain and suffering because it turns to God. And it cries out to God, expecting and trusting and knowing that God has the power to heal. Isn't there a balm in Gilead? Yes, we know there is. Isn't the Lord in Zion? Yes, we know the Lord is in Zion. Isn't the Lord here also with us? Yes, we know God is here. So why then have my people not been restored to health? How come, God? What's going on, God? It's not fair, God. It's not fair. God, you can heal us and only you. And we wait until that time when God acts. There's an acronym I learned some years ago, long enough ago I can't remember where and when I picked it up, and it's PUSH. I see one nodding. Okay. So PUSH. Pray until something happens. You keep praying. You keep crying out to God. You keep going for as long as it takes. You push through whatever setbacks and problems and mistakes and frustrations and confusion until you receive God's blessing. It's not unlike Jacob wrestling with the angel in Genesis. Jacob wrestled with that angel all night long, refusing to let go until the angel blessed him. The angel even asked Jacob, give up, let go, let's move on. Jacob wouldn't do it until the angel blessed him. You pray, you push through. You don't give up, you don't lose your faith. And we read in 1 Timothy this morning that we are to pray for all people. So if you're perhaps not in the position of lamenting and wrestling for yourself, pray and lament for those who are. Pray for a friend, for a relative, for a leader. Cry out to God on behalf of those who are hurting. Why, O Lord? How long, O Lord? And encourage those who are hurting to cry out for themselves. Each of us needs to struggle with God. And when we're at a point where we can't, then we need others to share our burdens and cry out to God for us. Keep praying, whatever form that prayer takes. You don't have to do what I do with the kids. We actually clap to hold your hands and close your eyes and bow your head. You can pray while walking. You can pray. My husband asked me where this example came from. I actually did it once. I was frustrated. And it was one of those times where you have to throw something. I was throwing a bouncy ball at a wall, yelling at God. It's a form of prayer. It's crying out to God. What's important is that you keep praying, that you keep the conversation with God going. Because you know what? God weeps and laments with you. We believe the Bible is the Word of God, and that means that these are actually God's lamentations also. God weeps for God's people. You remember the shortest verse in the Bible? It's 2 words, depending on the translation. He wept. Jesus wept. The context is where Jesus' friend Lazarus had died. Jesus knew Lazarus had been sick, and Jesus knew he was going to bring Lazarus back to life. Yet in the middle there, after Lazarus' death, before Lazarus' resurrection, Jesus weeps. Jesus is the balm in Gilead. He is the great physician, and he's the one who weeps for the wounds of his people. The last verse we read from Jeremiah this morning said, "If only my head were a spring of water and my eyes a fountain of tears, I would weep day and night for the wounds of my people." We live in this in-between time, like after Lazarus' death and before his resurrection. It's the already not yet of God's kingdom. Jesus has come and ushered in God's kingdom, and yet it's also not fully here yet. We know things are not as they should be, and yet we know there is a balm. There is a cure. I know we get impatient waiting. I know we get impatient waiting for God's kingdom to be here on earth as it is in heaven. I know we get impatient waiting for that great physician to heal. We know there is a balm, and yet we don't always feel the relief from it. At our district clergy gathering this past week, we celebrated communion, and our interim DS, Reverend DeLong, added a few words to the Last Supper part. He said, as Jesus and disciples were eating, Jesus told them, I am everything you have hoped for. Jesus is everything you have hoped for. He is the Messiah, the Redeemer, the one come to make the world whole again, the one come to make us whole again. And so we wait. And we look forward to that time when that happens, much like waiting during Advent for Christmas to come. As we read in Luke this morning, we will stay faithful until that time. And as we sing in our last hymn, while you wait, we share Jesus' love. We're expectant of healing to come because we're people of the resurrection. We know it's coming. Waiting can be hard. We know it's coming. Thanks be to God. Amen.